It's now time for the political analysis of Fromm and Fuller. Al Fromm, former political advisor to President Bill Clinton, and Craig Fuller, former political advisor to both President Ronald Reagan and George H.W. Bush. Good afternoon, all. Al, with less than 2 weeks to go in this presidential election, it's hard to be surprised that the Trump campaign has brought up Hunter Biden and evidence of corruption on a laptop. What is surprising is how little that story has been able to get in mainstream media. And the question is, does this show what President Trump has been repeatedly implying, that the press itself is corrupt?
Well, first of all, I don't think the press is corrupt. In fact, I think this story shows just the opposite, that it's not willing to be complicit in promoting what is likely disinformation, maybe from the Russians. I advise people to read the op-ed in The Spy today by J.E. Dean on this subject. But let's just go over what the story is about, because it's really bizarre. Hunter Biden, who was living in Los Angeles at the time, supposedly dropped off 3 laptops at a repair shop in Wilmington, Delaware, which happens to be 2,700 miles away from L.A., then didn't pick them up, never paid for it, and didn't pick them up. The owner of the shop happened to be a rabid Trump supporter who, when CBS News tried to authenticate the story in a long interview, told them that his girlfriend left him in 2016 because he voted for Trump. He said he thought the person dropping off the computer was Hunter Biden, but he couldn't be sure because, get this, he's legally blind. In December, he was so angry about impeachment that he somehow went into these 3 computers and found these incriminating emails. Those emails then wind up with crazy Rudy Giuliani, President Trump's personal attorney, who used to be a friend of mine, but is really, to me, gone off the deep end. Right after Giuliani met twice with somebody who the Treasury Department of the United States has identified as a Russian agent who was involved in interfering with the 2020 election. 3 weeks before the election, these emails now show up in Rupert Murdoch's New York Post, which has been on a very long vendetta against Hunter and Joe Biden. The paper sources were Giuliani and his well-trusted cohort, Steve Bannon, the former Trump strategist who was under federal indictment for fraud. According to the New York Times, in a story that was in the Times today, the 2 New York Post reporters refused to have their byline on the story because it couldn't be authenticated. So they found bylines. One was a former associate professor producer for Sean Hannity, who just conveniently, the day after the story appeared, made her Instagram account private because of all the pictures of Bannon and Roger Stone and other Trump friends. No other media outlet in the mainstream press could authenticate the story or verify its authenticity. After the story was published, more than 50 former intelligence officials, including people who were in the CIA, in both CIA directors, I think 4 or 5 of them, in both Republican and Democratic administrations, signed a statement saying they believed the story had, quote, has all the classic earmarks of a Russian information operation. So do I think the press was corrupt for not spreading that story? No, I'm a board member of what I think is the best journalism school in the country, as you can see behind me, the Northwestern Medill School. And I believe the press was correct in trying to alert Americans to what is likely a Russian disinformation campaign to disrupt our election.
Craig,
I really am not sure this is news, so it's hard to be critical of the news media for not, carrying a story that seems to be lacking in content or much original reporting or work. And I don't, I just think that Trump is on the attack, and this is part of that strategy. The bigger question in my mind is, what kind of a strategy is this? We're down to just days left in the campaign. We can talk more about the difficulty the Trump campaign has ahead of them. But one thing we know for sure is that the way to win over independent and undecided voters and disenchanted Republicans is probably not to attack Hunter Biden. It's just not a story that's going to bring votes to him. So to spend time on this, honestly, the most important commodity that you have in a campaign is time. It's not actually money, it's time. How do you spend your time? And for every minute that they spend on this, it's a minute not spent addressing the voters that they would have to win over if they're to have any kind of a chance. So I don't understand the strategy, and I'm not sure there's much news in this story. And I don't really think the people who hear the story are going to have their minds changed. They either believe there's something there, or the majority believe there's probably not much there at all.
Greg, staying with you, another interesting take on the presidential campaign is how President Trump is often sabotaging his own campaign's re-election strategy. A case in point was recently his decision to walk out on a 60 Minutes interview, and more importantly, not making any serious effort to reach voters outside his base. Is this the stable genius at work like in 2016, or will this backfire?
Well, we might be seeing the signs of somebody who's really inexperienced at the process of running for president. I mean, his last campaign was, one exciting rally after another with exceeding expectations, and it was a great, sort of euphoric series of wins at the primary level, and ultimately he won the election. I think probably it's not a partisan issue. I think Al and I have both seen people we know and respect who get involved in elected office just have a thrill that comes over them day after day, facing crowds of people that cheer them on. And in a way, it's a trap, and especially on the national level, when you can schedule events day after day after day with people who, yell and scream and are, wave signs and want to shake your hand. There's a sense that, there's no one against me, that I'm simply invulnerable. The people that have run for office before, whether it's for the city council or the governorship or a senate or house, and certainly for president, the people who have run for office before know that they're talking to a friendly crowd, and they're more circumspect, and they listen to analysis, and they listen to people who talk about how to craft a message to try to bring votes into your campaign. I don't think Trump does any of this. I think he loves the adulation. Whatever his state of mind is, this is something that he is not only willing to risk his life for, he's willing to risk other lives for. And I offer as evidence jumping in a vehicle to go wave to the people outside of a hospital, for goodness sakes. And I think he's just literally screening out, in his mind, he's screening out any of the negatives, and believes somehow that if he talks to enough people who support him, that he's going to win. It's not a strategy that I think is going to work, but I think that's the path he's on.
Al, chime in.
Well, I just remembered 1984 when Walter Mondale had big crowds, and Craig and President Reagan sort of took 49 states. But it's the best thing that ever happened to my career, so I can't complain. Look, I think the president is basically acting in character. He's clearly become unhinged, and the prospect of losing an election, I think, has made me act crazier and crazier every day. There was a headline in on today's Washington Post website that read, quote, Trump's campaign is laser focused on appealing to Donald Trump, end quote. Let's just see what he's done this week. He started out the week by attacking Dr. Fauci, who's only the world's greatest expert on infectious diseases. But it's crazy enough to attack him. But remember last week, he ran an ad that Fauci had to disavow because it claimed that Fauci was endorsing him. He can't decide which side he's on with Fauci, I guess. You know, then he goes state after state that are spiking in coronavirus cases, and he runs these super spreader events. As Craig says, he has no concern about his life or anybody else's. He calls Joe Biden a criminal. I mean, Joe Biden might be a lot of things, but I don't really think he's a criminal. And he's complaining that his own attorney general, who has not necessarily been the greatest purveyor of justice of all time, won't investigate Biden. Maybe he's just delusional from the drugs he took for his treatment of coronavirus. But he seems to be believing he's running for the presidency of Russia, not the United States. You know, if I were advising the Biden campaign, I'd suggest they get a food taster to go along with him in the last 2 weeks of the campaign. Why is he acting so desperate? Why is ranting so desperate? Let me give you a quick clue. According to the 538 polling average, which I think is the best there is, he's behind nationally by double digits. He's behind by significant margins in all of in almost all the battleground states. And as Craig said, he hadn't any time to turn it around. Now, he could make me look like a fool and run an inside straight like he did in 2016, but I doubt he will, and here's the reason. In 2016, 1/5 of the election, the electorate, disapproved, basically had unfavorable views of both Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And Trump won them in a landslide by almost 60-40. This year, both nationally and in the battleground states, Biden has a positive approval rating and Trump still has a very negative one. And those who dislike both candidates are more likely to vote for Biden because they vote against the incumbent. So I just think he's desperate, and it's, you know, he's afraid of losing, doesn't really know what to do, so he's just ranting and ranting.
Al Fromm, Craig Fuller, thanks a lot. I'll see you next time.